It is good to be with Zion, and it is always good to be back. I realized how long I've known Pastor Flores because I see how grown up Rachel is now. I was like, oh, Jesus. But it is good to be back, and I know our time is not real long, but there is a word that I want to share for tonight. So if you have a Bible, I'm going to start in Esther in the 8th chapter. And actually, while I won't reference all of the places where I am, there are a number of different places in Esther that will be referenced today. So in Esther chapter 8, and in chapter 8, going to actually look at verse 3. And in the New Revised Standard, it says, for Mordecai the Jew was next in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was powerful among the Jews and popular with his many kindred. For he sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his descendants. For he sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all his descendants. And for just a few minutes, we want to think about the fact that he cared for the people. And we often are in the book of Esther, and often when we're there, Mordecai is almost like a secondary character. We think about Esther, and we're always talking about Esther and what Esther has done. Don't always spend a lot of time with Mordecai. He just becomes one of those people who we sort of know is in the story, is there, but we aren't wondering about what he's doing or why he's doing it. And I think there are just some lessons that we could learn from him. I think there's some things about him, some things about what he has done that help us to know how we should live. And so we do a quick Cliff Notes version of the book. What we know, if we go at the very beginning, that the king, Xerxes, has ruling over a very large territory. He's got 127 different provinces, and they range from India to Ethiopia. So when we think about that, I mean, this king covered a lot of land, a whole lot of different nations as we would know them today. He really was powerful all in of himself. And that's the time when the story is set. But when we look at Mordecai, what we discover is that Mordecai is there because he's a part of the Jews who are living in exile. We learn his father had been gone, he had been gone, they had been deported, and they are living away from home. So he is one of those who are there living in this land that's not his own land, but making good of what he's done. We also learn that he doesn't have children of his own, but he's been raising his cousin Hadassah, or who we more commonly known as Esther. And then he has adopted her and treats her as if she was his own daughter. We know that Esther becomes queen. But when she becomes queen, Mordecai charges her not to reveal her nationality. But he checks on her all the time, but he never says they are related. We know that because he sits at the gate, he's checking on Esther. We know that while he's there, he hears about a plot on the king's life. He sends word, they discover it, they find out it's true, the people are hung, but nothing happens to him. And when we look at it, it just doesn't make sense. We got this man who lives in exile. He's doing this good work. He's raising this cousin as his daughter. And we begin to think, like, does he not like recognition? Because we would think that he'd be getting some credit for raising Esther. We really think something would happen on his behalf when the daughter he has raised is now queen. We think he got invited to the party. We think he maybe got a promotion. We would think something good would happen. And many of us, if it didn't happen on its own, we would be sending little emails and stuff to say, hey, did you forget? Mordecai doesn't do any of that. Then after there's this plot on the king's life and the king is safe, we really think something should happen. And so Mordecai helps us to understand that recognition is not always the most important thing. And even though we live in a society where people are encouraged to stand up for themselves, we live in a time where people are encouraged that you got to speak out for yourself. Mordecai says to us that recognition is not the most important thing. And it's a lesson, I think, that all of us can learn and be reminded that sometimes you do what you do and you aren't getting recognized for it. Sometimes you do what you do because it's the right thing to do, and you just let it go by. You just don't make a big deal out of it. And then we wonder, well, what is important to Mordecai? And so while recognition in and of itself was not important, when Haman, who gets the king to issue an edict that all the Jews would be killed, when that is made public, we start seeing something different about Mordecai. Because once that edict is made public, once it's out there, we see a whole different side of Mordecai. This Mordecai who hasn't had recognition, this Mordecai who hasn't brought attention to himself, is going around the city in sackcloth and ashes. This Mordecai is wailing. He's wailing for what's going to happen to his people. This Mordecai, when it's a matter of standing up for his people, comes back now and pushes Esther. He doesn't push Esther to recognize him as the one who raised her, but he pushes Esther to take a stance, to stand up for the people whose lives are going to get killed. And we know she finally goes in, but I think what I want to see tonight, that she does it because Mordecai cares for the people. He cares for the good of the community. He cares for the unnamed people whose names he may never, ever know. But when he saw that the people would be hurt and harmed, that's when he stands up, not for himself, but to save lives. And in a bit, that helps us and reminds us of Joseph, who way back in Genesis saved lives. He saved the lives not just of his own family, but he saved the lives for the whole people when he saves the food during the good 7 years so that they have food during the time of famine. And Mordecai, like that, is speaking out for the good of the people. And so it's intriguing as it goes forward, because if you look in chapter 8, after Haman has now been killed and has been hung, and Mordecai now is being publicly recognized as related to Esther, one of the first things he does is not ask for clothes, not ask for outward things. First thing he does is ask for letters to be written on behalf of the Jews. His first public act is an act of concern for the community. And because a letter, an edict that had been signed by the king and sealed with his signet ring could not be revoked, another set of letters had to be written so that the king could sign them again and they could go out. And that's what Mordecai asked for. He asked for that to be done, which will save the people's lives. And so I think he challenges us to ask ourselves, am I willing to stand up for the good of the community? Do I pause? Do I think about what will make a difference for the community? Are the needs of the community, the needs of the total group, more important than my own? And as I thought about that, I was reminded of Nelson Mandela. And definitely in his autobiography, but when you view the movie Invictus, one of the things you see in that are the ways in which his years of prison had helped him get a mindset so that when he was out, he kept thinking for the good of the whole community. And there's so many scenes where he is taking action because he sees a vision that will help change all of South Africa. He was placing the good of the whole country ahead of his own needs. That's what Mordecai had done. And so Mordecai reminds us that we don't need to push for recognition for ourselves just so that we would be pumped up. But we need to be able to take a stand when that stand will transform the community and will make life different and the world better for the larger good. And I pray that God will help us, because surely we live in a time and in an age where the people of God need to have a great big vision. We need to see the world so much bigger than it's seen today, so that we can be led by God to take actions that will benefit all, so that the world we live in will be a fairer world, a more just world, a more peaceful world, because the people of God have learned to follow Mordecai and have learned to stand up for the things that are for the good of all. Be a Mordecai, because the world needs you. Grace and peace.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Woodard. Appreciate that insight on Mordecai, an oft overlooked figure in the scriptures, and praise the Lord that Dr. Woodard has raised this to our attention, and at such a time as this, that's exactly who you want to be, standing up for what's right, raising your voice when you need to do so, and how God blessed and used that. Praise the Lord. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the Facebook live stream.